Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Paula Mesola de Herrera, and I'm running for school board. And today I have an awesome guest, my dear friend, Maria Cadenas, who is running for Santa Cruz City Council. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but basically today I'm creating these Friday chats to help my community, Culver City, understand me, get to know me, also share my network with our community so that they understand my world. And what's really important to me is that as the only Latina running here in Culver City, and I feel like I have been relying heavily on my Latina sisters that are doing the same in their part of our state and other parts of the state. So Maria, without further ado, tell me, introduce yourself. ¿Cómo te va allá en Santa Cruz?
Oh, hola, Paula. It's a pleasure to be here with you and see you, because I think both of us are running our campaigns and it keeps us busy, plus our full-time jobs, right? So it is an honor to be here. And Santa Cruz, is the same thing. I'm the only Latina running for city council. And in fact, if elected, I will be the first Latina to ever sit on the city council for the city. And it's both an honor to kind of take that mantle of even running, but it's also an awakening, right? Of when we look at the population and we look at the importance of representation, and it's both a privilege and a responsibility, right? But aquí estamos, tomando cafecito, eating pan dulce, whatever we need to do to keep going.
Well, thank you so much. Cancel.
Let me tell you a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and my background for Culver City. We actually met at the Hope Leadership Institute, and at the time, I was really focused on creating children's savings accounts for all the newborns in Santa Cruz County, so that at birth they knew that the community was behind them and their academic goals. I'm the executive director of Santa Cruz Community Ventures, where we really look at economic empowerment and helping people address the income and wealth gaps. And before that, I was overseeing the global strategy and implementation of Philanthropy for Driscoll's, the largest marketer and distributor of berries. And so I oversaw the US, Mexico, Chile. I worked for the ACLU of Wisconsin as their associate director and as executive director of Cream City Foundation, which is the second oldest LGBT foundation in the US. And so those are my resume, which people are welcome to check. But at core, what I am is a problem solver and a doer. And I really hope people implanted at heart, making sure that we move towards justice. And that's what moves me. And I've been honored to get to know you and work with you over the years. And I know how valuable you would be for the Culver City School Board.
Well, Maria, you're always breaking those barriers. I don't know many Latinas who are working in creation of wealth. And so, that's amazing work that you have done. It's awesome to have someone with that background running for city council in Santa Cruz. And honestly, I think as a first generation Latina, right? Like, I went to school, I'm the first one to graduate from high school or a bachelor's or a master's in my family. And we have a lot of family members. Like, my grandparents had like 15 kids. And so, we're all like, we share that in common, right? That we're like the first ones to be breaking these barriers. And so I think it's amazing that you have a background in building wealth, because we need as Latinos to build wealth, and in addition to build education, right? Making sure that we have educational opportunities, and that's why I'm running for school board, because I remember when I was in high school and my parents were struggling. We were living in the Central Valley, and my parents were struggling to make ends meet. And when I turned 14, my counselor at the high school told me, hey, we have this summer program that you can go and you can work with local businesses and make money in the summer. And I jumped on the opportunity at 14, and I haven't stopped working since 14, because this created an opportunity for me to make a little bit of money so that I can execute my dreams, right? Like I had to pay for some of my fee waivers to apply for college. I had to pay sometimes for, buying that suit to go to interviews, and that money that I made in that summer internship at 14 was so detrimental to helping me, like give me that leg up that I needed so bad when I was 14, living in the Central Valley with lack of opportunities. And that's what I want to transition now. I wanted to talk to you because what's happening in Culver City is when our high school students graduate, Santa Cruz is one of the cities, and UC Santa Cruz is one of the cities that our students love going. I tell you, my son got into UC Santa Cruz and he wanted to go. However, the financial aid package wasn't as favorable as what he got at a state college, so he went out of state on a full tuition scholarship. But tell us, Maria, what opportunities, or how do you interact with all the youth that come in, or the young adults that come in to Santa Cruz as part of the UC Santa Cruz enrollment?
Yeah, so I just want to echo how important it is to have leaders who understand what it is to be first generation college student, because it is its own journey. I myself, I'm the first one to graduate from college from my family and to get a master's also. And I had a lot of people help me out, and it really was the high school counselor, the high school teachers, friends that helped pull money together so I can pay that application fee. So it was a lot of people that allowed me to be where I am. And I think it is our responsibility as neighbors, as leaders, as elected officials to do the same for the generation that's coming next. And Santa Cruz is a beautiful city, and UC Santa Cruz is an amazing school. And we also face tremendous challenges. The fact is that we have a housing crisis in Santa Cruz, and the cost of housing is extremely high. It's the fifth in the world. The campus does not have enough housing on their own to house all the students. So a lot of students have to go into the community to rent rooms. And as much as Santa Cruz is an institution that welcomes and encourages Latino student body, I think that there's work to be done to not only allow them to register or apply or be accepted, but actually help them graduate, right? Make sure that the financial packages are adequate. And there's jobs in Santa Cruz, but they're not living wage jobs for students. A lot of them are in services or tourism. And so I think that the reality of the cost of living is high. And I say that even as much as I love the city and as much as I work closely with UC Santa Cruz, there's a lot of work to be done. And one of the challenges that we're having is that the UC Regents and UC Santa Cruz are looking at expanding their growth. But with it, we really need to work with them to have their commitment to develop the housing and services so that students don't go without food in order to pay their room and board. And students can create the quality of an education experience that they seek. I think that we put education really high up, not only as a vehicle for economic mobility in the future, but really como desarrollo, no? To develop you as a person. And I think that's something that we can do better. And one of the reasons I'm running for city council in Santa Cruz is because, we have about 30% of the population is Latino. But when you talk to them, they don't feel like they belong. Se sienten como que no importan. And to give an example, they don't have an interpreter for city council meetings. Mm-hmm. They've recently issued 2 surveys for community input, and they were not translated in Spanish. And it's not necessarily intentionally, but it does reflect the lack of awareness of where we need to go. And I believe strongly that as neighbors in Santa Cruz, we're welcoming to students and we want them to be here and thrive because they contribute so much. And at the same time, we're not doing enough to create affordable housing. We're not doing enough to welcome them. And I can tell you as a first generation student, my college, I went also out of state. I went to a small college. But the scaffolding around there to make sure that I stayed and graduated was significant. We as first years, we were to arrive a week before any other student. I had counselors that work with me. We build cohorts. And then my admissions counselor went above and beyond. He would have dinners at his house to make sure that the Latinos that he recruited, because he was Latino, felt like they had a connection and somebody in administration to work with. I wonder how much of that is being done actively for students, because you don't know the system. I think that when we look at, and I'm just going to talk a little longer, you can edit anything you want out of this, but when we look at college, part of the benefit is the degree, yes, but it is the quality of the education that we get, and most importantly, is the networks and social circles that you build. Because, you get jobs through acquaintances, to connections, to people that know you. It is that type of social capital that needs to be developed. And when you're the first generation to go and you don't have that social capital, you're so worried just about keeping your grades and not letting your family down. You don't take advantages of some of the other pieces that are there to help you when you graduate. Internships, jobs. Can you even afford an internship if it's not paid? So I think all of those are questions that the UC system should look into and strengthen. I'm not saying that they're not doing it. I think it needs to be strengthened. But you cannot strengthen that and not address students being able to be housed and be able to feed themselves and not living in cars. So I think that's something that is just a reality for any student and just an awareness of what it means. But there's more that we can do in the city, and there's definitely more that we can do to make sure that we are changing our processes and structures to make it more welcoming for Latino community members so that they know that they belong and have a voice.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to touch on something you said, and it's something that I'm actually running, one of my priority areas, and that is housing stabilization. I just want to put a shout out to our city council in Culver City. We just passed this week, September 29, the final signature and readout of permanent rent protections for our city. Before the work that we started as Protect Culver City Renters Coalition, we didn't have a single protection, Maria. Like, there was nothing in place. And we were hearing like hundreds of families, I should say, one year in 2016, and this is what kind of like rung the bell, was that 96 families had exited our school district because of rent increases. And not to mention the many teachers that were dislocated, that are commuting in and are tired of commuting, and they changed jobs because they can't afford to live here in Culver City. So I'm one of the only school board candidates who's running on housing, because like I truly understand, like, if we want a child to thrive, a student to thrive, and that's what you were talking about, UC Santa Cruz, then we need to ensure that the community that they're in provides for affordable housing, provides for protections. And I think for me, one of the things that people said, well, you have Section 8. We have very little Section 8. And to me, Section 8 only helps with the most vulnerable communities, right? They have to be at really low socioeconomic financial status to even be eligible for Section 8. What about everybody else, right? Like, what if you're making, $15 an hour? You probably don't qualify for Section 8. If you're making any amount of money, like you typically don't qualify for Section 8. So we need to look beyond, what we offer, and at different levels of financial status, provide not status, but financial bracket, be giving people a leg up, right? So for those who are making a living wage, what can we do for them, right? And I think that for that group of community members, they need renter protections, because if they're barely at a living wage, a $300 increase in their rent can destroy their finances. And if this happens year after year, I mean, like, the families have no choice but to exit our community. And And you know, my slogan is, or what I'm running for is like, we need to build a community of learning from all, right? Because it's so important for our students to feel like our schools are their community too, right? They don't just go there
Yeah.
and listen to teachers. This is their community. And I agree. You said something that about how in city council there's no translators, right? There's like the Spanish speaking monolingual community typically is not represented and it's not offer resources to join these spaces where leaders are at and they're making decisions and we never hear their voice. um, and one thing that I'm very proud is that, for example, in our school board, the newsletter is translated to Spanish. Now, I come from a thought, like my philosophy is that just because you translate something doesn't mean that now parents are going to show up at the PTA meeting
Yeah.
or they're going to show up
Yeah.
at, you know, open house. And and honestly, and this is not a judgment or criticism on our school newsletter, but oftentimes there's so many typos or misspellings in the Spanish translation that I feel like it deters Spanish speakers from even attending, because they're like, well, what kind of person is going to be there talking to me, right? If they can't spell, you know, junta. It's true, like this is what's happening, right? And it's because our schools are
Yeah.
so underfunded that we don't have resources to really get you know, someone who has if sufficient knowledge to translate our newsletter. What do you think about, like, what can we do to, in addition to providing translators, in addition to providing of you know, translating the questionnaires, providing translators at city council meetings, how can we engage the Latino community? Because I think they need more than just translating to get them out.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more that they need more. You know, the challenge, two things there. One, there is money in schools, even though budgets are tight, but budgets are a reflection of values. So what are cities, what are schools valuing and putting money towards? If there's money for a newsletter and staff to do a newsletter, there should be allocation and distribution to ensure access to parents' information in language. Even if it means less newsletters a year, even if it means, you know, a shorter newsletter in order to allow for pages in Spanish and in English. I think that, again, budgets are a reflection of values, and the money dictates kind of what is the school board valuing. And in times of austerity, I have my MBA, I know numbers, I recognize numbers, but just because we have budget cuts and limited budgets doesn't mean that we shift values. It is the values that will guide you what you prioritize in that budget and what do you keep. And it is not a cut across the board, because the cuts hurt differently to different populations. So if you prioritize access, you're going to make sure that that access is for every student and every parent. Beyond translation, I do think that the literacy level in which materials are being created needs to be reviewed, because if we look at the literacy of the parents who are leading that, it needs to match their literacy level. Now, we want their children to grow higher, but for example, we have third grade reading levels in some of our communities in Santa Cruz, and we have college level reading city materials. So exactly how are you supposed to engage? And then not even accounting for a digital divide and access to broadband or technology. But the biggest question to me, Paula, is that we're asking people to, in essence, translate and invite people to systems that are not welcoming, whether you put them in English or Spanish. There's no childcare, meetings take place at a certain time, public transit is not always available for them to go when these are meetings. So there's a lot of questions that we have to acknowledge, that in order to get to the systems that we envision when all neighbors and all parents can participate, it means that we have to change the system that prevented their participation, right? And it is not just language access. And that change can be really scary. It can be very It feels like a personal attack for those that have worked so hard over the years, but it's not. Let's recognize the amazing contribution and leadership of all the educators, of all the school board members, of all the city council members that have allowed our cities to get where they are, but also recognize that even as they did that, people were left behind, and there's plenty of work to do, and that would require some changes to the models that we're creating maybe 20 or 30 years ago, because our communities have changed from 20 to 30 years ago. The realities of labor has changed. So what can they afford? What can they do? All of that needs to be taken into account. And so I do think that the ones that would know the best how to engage parents and Latino parents are Latino parents. And it's allowing for their engagement in those school board decisions and the city decisions, and shifting ownership as much as we can. But it will take time because, I heard recently change happens at the speed of trust. And so if there's limited trust, even if I saw something simple as core translation of school materials, then that needs to be invested and make sure that it develops. And it starts by making sure you have representatives who care, who listen, and that is why it's so important that you're running.
Oh my God, what an amazing quote. You're gonna have to tell me who said that. Change happens at the speed of trust. Oh my God, that really gets to the core of representation. If you want, the community to be active in your city, you need to ensure that the people who are making decisions represent that community. And I think that this is why it's so important to take a keen look at why we need to represent our community. For example, in Culver City, our student body is composed 38% Latinos, and I will be only the second Latina ever elected in the history of our school district. And I will be the first one that is a progressive candidate. And for me, it's really important to differentiate what a progressive candidate is for Culver City, because that word is being thrown, around like pan caliente. It's like, oh, I'm a progressive, and for me, like, a progressive is someone. For me, it means a progressive is someone that is going to look out for the well-being of humans and treat people like humans, regardless of their legal status. Thankfully, our school system our school district is a safe zone, and I helped build or bring the policy for sanctuary city as part of CCAN, and so treating people like humans, regardless of their legal status, is important. Treating people like humans, regardless of whether they're English learners or native speakers. Treating students like humans, regardless of whether they have an address in Culver City or they're students on a permit, and they live outside our city boundaries. And these are the inequities that we see in our school, that, for example, students that 80% of the students who are late get suspended. And the majority of who are late are African American students, and they're also the majority who live outside our city, our boundaries, and so they're on a permit. My children, for a period of time, were on a permit too, because we lived right outside the school district. And a progressive is someone that's going to for me, is someone that's going to say, like, hey, we need to look at this policy that if a child is late, they have most students don't have a means to get themselves to school. So they don't have the control to get to school, and yet they have all the responsibility to be suspended, right? Like, they're the ones losing out of being in school because they couldn't get to school on time. So those are the policies I hope to change, like that policy on if you're tardy, a certain number, you're going to get suspended. I really want to take that policy out. I think it's really important. We need to treat these students with equity, and we need to think about how can we help them, right? How can like we need to talk to the parents and be like, okay, how can we break this barrier for you, right? Because this is a barrier of your child being here late. What can we do, right? And I don't think we're doing that. We're not doing that. We're just punishing the student for something that's out of their control. But I wanted to ask you this question of you, Maria. What does it mean for you to be a progressive running for Santa Cruz City Council?
I'm smiling because that was such a tough question. And I don't like labels. I think, especially in politics, I like to be an independent thinker. I like to just be independent and talk to people. And I believe strongly in people and planet first. It became the campaign slogan, but I think you're right. It's about people. It's about how do we ensure that all people belong. And recently I said, look, it's not about place making. It is. We start with place making, but it's about place keeping. How do we ensure that the structures that we're doing, say in Santa Cruz, in the city of Santa Cruz, or in a school board, are only not creating the policies, but ensuring that they stay there and creating the outcomes and the impacts that we want. And that includes looking at data, and including demographic data like race and gender and class, to make sure that the pathways, the access, the availability is there for everybody. To me, a progressive is about, I guess it's about people and planet. It's about people and planet. And when I talk to youth, they're so disillusioned with our political system. They're so disillusioned with the two-party system, because a party system is still a system that was instigated before them and instigated by people not like them. And so it makes it harder for them to have a voice. And I challenge, specifically in Santa Cruz, it's been known as the leftist city in the country. But when you look at the data and the outcomes in Santa Cruz across race and class, it is no different than the most segregated city that I lived in, which was Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right? We have the same disparities based on race as other cities in this country. And so it didn't matter whether it was a progressive council or a centrist council or right-wing council, the outcomes and the disparities were the same. Now, there are some things that were better, sense of, some things were better, like we're a sanctuary city too. We have safe zones in the schools, extremely welcoming for LGBT communities, and yet the disparities are still there. So one of the challenges and questions that I ask is not to fall into the idea that just because you have the label that you're doing the work to create the change to improve everybody. So I say that for me, it's people and planet first. I stand by that. I'm very honored to have the support of the Working Families Party. But because it is about that, it's about how do we ensure that all people thrive and belong. And the only way we do that, and we learned it in social sciences, we learned it in philanthropy, the only way you create systems that are sustainable, that are thriving, and actually create better outcomes for everybody in our communities is by making sure that we center our decisions, policies, processes around those most in need, because everybody else will benefit from it. And I think that's key. So I smile because I don't like labels, but I work for people and planet. Like I said, I center my work around, it might sound a little, maybe it may sound a little Santa Cruzian, but I believe strongly that the reason I'm running and the reason why we need this discourse, it comes from a sense of love for each other as neighbors and love for our planet, and a recognition that the systems that we have, we actually, as people, as humans, they were created by humans. And so we have the power and the ability to change them. And so I have faith in our ability to step up to our better selves and work towards that. So whether you're progressive or not progressive, let's center around what we have in common, center in our love and care for each other, and make sure that we put people and planet first.
Maria, this is so amazing having you today. I know I've taken more than, the few minutes that I asked of your time. Time right now is so valuable. I understand because you're running this very tough campaign. Do you have any last parting words? I mean, I know I just want to make sure we get all the wisdom from you today.
So thank you again for having me. It's so good to connect and make time to learn about the amazing work that you're doing down in Culver City, and for the people to ensure that their voices are heard. I'll just encourage everybody, please vote. Vote. It's so important. It's the one tool we have to make sure that our voices are heard. So don't let it go to waste, and then stay engaged. That's the other thing. Is like voting is one step, but you have to stay engaged. You have to be committed to it, especially for youth. I know it's hard, but that's the only way good things happen, by working hard at it and staying true to them. And last but not least, please complete the census. Participen en el censo. Es una manera súper importante de asegurar de que sus escuelas tengan los recursos necesarios. So don't let the census pass you by. You can do it online. You can do it over the phone. If you've got a mailing, so submit it. So vote and complete the census. And Paola, gracias de nuevo. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and always learn from you as we move forward in both of our races here in California.
Juntas vamos a ganar. Well, thank you, Maria, for joining us today. This is our first Friday chat, and we'll be having more Friday chats throughout October, so Culver City gets to learn about who I am, and what are my priority areas, and also most importantly, introduce you to the network of community leaders that I have surrounded myself with. And I want to end by saying, by just agreeing with Maria. It's so important for us to vote November 3rd more than ever. Please register. Register today. Don't wait till the last day. And the census right now has a deadline of October 5th. Don't wait till October 5th. Like, do it today. You know, you remember, you have to find that envelope that was mailed to you with that number to fill it out online. So it's important for you to make a plan to do it today. Don't wait until October 5th. We don't know if there will be another extension, but for now, please fill out the census. This is how funds are allocated for everything from school to health to infrastructure, and it's so important for our communities to make sure that every single one is counted, because we as humans are all important and we all need to be counted, regardless of, like I said, regardless of our status, legal status. I know the Latino community is scared to fill this out because some of them have mixed status homes, but please know that that question is not on the census. You don't need to worry about that. Well, I just wanted to end also with the census. So please fill out the census. Next Friday chat is with Matthew K. from Bezedek. He is an attorney providing free legal services for any tenant who is having eviction problems. They do Culver City legal clinics. So stay tuned for our next speaker, for our next Friday chat. Thank you so much. And si se puede, Culver City. Let's, and I would say, si se puede, Santa Cruz. Let's get some Latinas in leadership.
Si se puede. Thank you, Paula. Hasta luego.
Adiós. Okay.